Everybody, welcome back after I can't remember how long it's been now. It's been a little while to the TPN podcast, or Contemplating Debating as we like to call it, which in this episode we might debate something, we might not, but we'll find out on this edition of the TPN podcast. More at, I say 10 because it sounds catchy, but more at 40 minutes past 8 with my host, Tommy Bowyer.
Hello, London. Good to see you.
Hello, London. Yes, no, Tommy. Then London's not watching. They're busy protesting.
Oh, yes, of course. Sorry. I was so sorry about that. Completely forgot.
You know, the London liberal elite who all bashed Dominic Cummings for driving up to Durham in his own car, social distancing from everyone, making sure he's not actually spreading the virus by keeping it within his own family and his own vehicle. But no, they're all out in London at the moment, disobeying all the social distancing guidelines that they criticised Dominic Cummings last week about.
Yes, that's
Hypocrisy
very
right there
true.
for you.
Yeah, that's very true. You can see them all. You can see a second wave coming by the way they're all acting in London.
But it's going to be Boris's fault though, isn't it?
Oh, people are already starting to get in that it's Boris's fault. I've seen on Instagram like people saying, when you don't claim that a second wave's going to start because we're all protesting against racism. Because if a second wave starts, it is Boris and the government's fault. So basically, people are already blaming Boris for everything already. You know, they've already, anything that goes wrong, blame the government. You know, I think that's
it
that's
can't
a
be
really
any
negative.
of their faults. Thousands of people out there disobeying social distancing rules, causing havoc, causing damage, shouting at London police, saying, and like what they're doing in London, I think is pretty bad compared to their, protesting police brutality in America because of what happened to that George Floyd, which of course we can all say was wrong, like how the police in America handled that situation, what they did, multiple instances where police in America have been, well, their behaviour has just been outright, wrong, and but then shouting outside Whitehall and shouting at our British police who have nothing to do with a completely different system in America. I mean, what are you actually achieving?
Yeah.
It's like people who complain about not having, equal rights and stuff, but then not actually directing their attention at the places that are actually violating, human rights and all that stuff.
Oh yeah, definitely. What happened in America was wrong, but it's very common in America. Police structure in America is very different to the UK. Corrupt cops are very well protected by power.
No, don't get me wrong. We know in America, there is a problem there. There is a problem that we're not like glossing over the fact that a lot of people's anger's not unwarranted, but at the same time.
But in this country, policing is handled a lot better. There's a very much stricter structure to it, and there's not loads. There is corrupt officials in every institute. You know, there just is naturally. People try and play the system, but I would say the majority of the police officers in the UK are not corrupt, and they do try their best to bring order. Which I think brings to the point with these protests is you've seen a lot of police officers getting attacked and beaten up. And there was photos yesterday of a police horse that bolted in the protest, and protesters were starting to hit the horse and throw bricks at it. And, hitting police officers is one thing, but when you attack an innocent animal that obviously had no involvement in the protests or even the police force whatsoever, is just like an innocent animal, and protesters to attack animals and police officers, that is wrong, because it goes against what they should be standing up for. If they're standing up to end police brutality and to end racism by beating up the police and trying to attack people and all of that, that is not going to help the matter. If anything, that's just
especially
making it
not
worse.
In this country. Because
you're
like I said, like how like we're dealing with complete different beasts altogether in terms of the UK protests where the police are there, you know, like in any protest to keep the order, keep the peace. They're there not really doing much apart from if they get attacked, you know, of course they're going to have to fight back. Whereas we see in America in the protests where it's completely the flip side, where, you know, Donald Trump's called the National Guard and they've literally been given orders in the riots and protests to literally just go in and just, well, you know,
Take no prisoners.
literally they've been given like a blank sheet saying, get rid of the crowds by any means, shoot them with rubber bullets or whatever, go in there, you know, break their legs pretty much, just go in and just free reign to do pretty much anything. And like we've seen lots of instances where, you know, the police and National Guard, they're there, you know, standing with the protesters, not actually, you know, engaging them in and having actual peaceful protests, which we're all for. We're all for whether we agree or not a form of peaceful protest, and a lot of people are doing it right. Don't get me wrong. Like we always focus on the bad, especially on both sides. We focus more on the bad, more on of what happens in the world, opposed to focusing on the actual good instances, the good police officers, not letting a few bad bunch spoil it for the rest of us.
Oh, I think some of the protests in the UK, especially, not so much the US, but especially in the UK over this last weekend, has been absolutely disgusting.
Yeah.
How some of them have been acting. There is, you know, there is footage, and it is proper footage of a lot of graffiti on war memorials in London, and even Black Lives Matter protesters saying that they're going to come for Winston Churchill.
That I've seen in London today was awful.
Yeah,
of them.
I mean,
defacing and damaging, like, you know, a memorial to Winston Churchill. You know, did you see like a lot of them at the cenotaph as well?
Yeah,
the London cenotaph today, like absolutely ridiculous and so disrespectful.
You know, these people, and some of the war memorials. Let's get this straight: the war memorials are not white only. There was plenty of ethnic minorities that fought in the Great Wars and whose names are written on those war memorials. So by defacing them, you are defacing people who gave their life in service of this country to end real tyranny.
Yeah.
They were fighting against the Nazis and the fascists in Italy and you know, Japan, who were true tyrants. They fought against them and gave their lives. And now you're basically saying by graffitiing them that they are, you know, the tyrants themselves. That's wrong. I mean, pulling down a statue of Winston Churchill, who, and I don't know if Matthew agrees with this, is probably considered one of the greatest prime ministers this country has ever had, and who's acclaimed as being one of the 20th century's most important figures in what he did for history and what he did for this country. To deface his statue and say you're going to tear it down because he had views which now are very outdated, but at the time were held by the majority of people. He was a British imperialist, like the majority at the time who were British imperialists, you know. And you've got to look at these things. This is the thing about that the protesters don't understand. You can't erase history. What they want to do is completely wipe out history and start afresh in the modern world. You cannot do that. You have to look at history, see where you went wrong, and then learn from it. You can't just erase it. Yes, Winston Churchill was a racist. You know, Lord Nelson was a slave owner. But in the context of their times, the majority were like that. So you cannot erase that. The good that people like Winston Churchill and Lord Nelson did outweigh the bad stuff. No one in history is perfect. So you need to weigh up what they actually did it was a good for history and what they did that was negative for history. It's not as black and white as these protesters are making out.
No, of course it's not. And also, it's probably good to mention that yes, of course, with the core message of what the protest is about, that me and Tommy do actually support the core message of what the protesters are meant to be about. Of course, Black Lives Matter. Of course, we support that message. Of course, we support ending racism towards the black community, especially, but any group, like racism in any forms not acceptable. We know that, and of course we do support the message that Black lives do matter. There's no question behind that. It's just we're questioning like what it's evolved into, like just like the behavior that's stemming from it now is getting. And I know we complain about the behaviors. I know it is not the majority of people. I know it is like we always focus on the bad stuff on both sides, and that's what really drags it all down for everyone.
Oh, I agree with peaceful protest. Don't get me wrong. Peaceful protest has gotten legislation passed. I mean, just look at Martin Luther King and the civil rights legislation during the 1960s. They were all peaceful protests, and they got the government to take them seriously, and they got legislation passed. What these protests are doing, and there are peaceful protests. Don't get me wrong. I have nothing against peaceful protests, and I believe that Black Lives Matter, just like all lives matter. And I've had people say to me, because I've said all lives matter, I'm missing the point entirely. Well, in their eyes, I might be, but in my personal opinion, I don't judge someone automatically as I see them on the color of their skin. If they are black, I don't automatically assume, they've had a bad life, they've had to work harder than me. The same as when I see a white person, I don't say, they've got white privilege, they've had everything handed to them on a plate, because it is wrong to generalize people in that way. Yes, I am white. I've had a better life than some, but I've still had to work incredibly hard to get the qualifications which I have. I am on an 8 hours. I have a permanently 8 hours a week at where I work. If I had white privilege, which from what I've read means you have a privilege above those of an ethnic minority, I wouldn't have dropped out of university. I wouldn't be stuck on an 8 hour a week contract. So I believe this idea that every white person has white privilege is wrong. I do not think that is true. And it's just the same. Not every black person and those from an ethnic minority has had a negative life and a bad start in life. I don't believe that is true. And that's obviously just me. That's not everyone's opinion, but that seems to be my problem. That seems to be my issue with the protests. It's not that they're trying to educate people about racism, because I think it's correct. You should be trying to educate people. The problem you have is it's the patronizing nature in which in which they're trying to deliver it. They keep basically shouting down your throat and saying you're wrong, admit you're wrong, everything we're saying is right. And of course, you don't persuade someone to understand your argument by basically saying I'm right, you're wrong. That's not how you persuade someone. And I think this is a lot of people are getting annoyed with these protests because it's the patronizing nature in which they're trying to deliver their message across. I just think there's a better way to educate people. I hope in the future we live in a world when race is virtually non-existent in terms of we don't judge someone based on their race. We don't even bring it up.
No.
Now, if you've seen some of these podcasts before, you'll know I'm quite a nationalist. I believe in, I'm English first and all of that. But never have I taken into account skin color or ethnic background when referring to that, because to me it doesn't matter if you're black or Asian or white. It doesn't matter. We're all human beings, and you judge someone on the person they are, not on the color of their skin.
Yeah, definitely. And also another thing that's annoyed me, especially from people in this country, is have you seen the social media? Because the Twitter elite and all that stuff. Because the views of Twitter is of
Yeah.
course the views of Twitter represents the views of the country. Just look at the 2019 general election, for example.
Oh, yeah. Twitter represents the entire United Kingdom there,
Yeah,
as we well know.
100% of it. Yeah, of everyone's going on social media. This particularly annoys me of people in this country. Not so much in America because you could argue there are possible reasons why you could have anger towards the police in this current climate in America
Yeah,
in terms of what you've seen on social media. But have you seen the trend of ICAB,
I have
which
seen that.
stands for All
I
Cops Are Bastards, which I think is
Oh
not a good way to go at all at this. In fact, I
no.
completely disagree with that message, saying, "Oh yes, because of a few bad cops in America, suddenly all the police, all the police in England, they're bastards. They're bad people, aren't they? Surely no." And
Yeah.
I want to say to all these lefty liberal people who complain about every police officer is bad in this country is next time your home is getting robbed, next time you've been assaulted and you need the police, and you'll be more than happy to accept their help then, but now you want to just say every single police officer is bad and racist and all that stuff, when actually they do play a good job in society. And you're going to be the same people who, when you actually need the police, when you've been a victim of a crime, and they're not going to turn their backs on you either. Like you complain about this, but when you're in the position when you need them, and they don't, and how about they choose all these people who are using this message? How about we just leave you to it because cops are so, because the police are so bad, you can just handle it. No.
Yeah, well, I've seen
Grow up.
quotes from people saying, "Imagine a world without police officers," and it was this image of all sunny green hills and that. It's like a world without police officers would end in mob rule
Yeah.
and anarchy. If you didn't have police officers, there would be quite a few people that would look at like houses and go, "You know what? What's stopping me from
Yeah.
stealing from there?" And before you know it, you're out of control. And let's be clear, law enforcement in this country, people hold it in a negative view. If you are involved in law enforcement, then
Yeah.
people don't like you. If police officers, judges, lawyers, people just genuinely don't like you because they see you as part of law enforcement, which is apparently all corrupt. Because
It's
that's the view.
part of the whole image, though. You've got to be rebellious against, authority and law.
It's like, I firmly believe quite a few people in the protest this weekend, because Priti Patel came out on Saturday morning and said, please don't go out and protest because of the coronavirus
Yeah.
pandemic. I bet some people who listened to that and thought, you know what, screw that, I'm going to go out and protest because it's against
Screw the
government.
Tories. I'm going outside.
Exactly, and it makes it worse. It makes it worse because obviously the governing party at the moment are the Conservatives.
Yeah.
And historically speaking, protests always rise when the Conservatives are in power because the left don't have a lot of people in the left don't have the dignity and civilness of the right and will go out and shout and protest. And that's obviously what's happening now. They're all outside number 10 Downing Street shouting and, Black Lives Matter and all of that. It's clear that some of these, not all, because some are peaceful protesting, some people do believe in the cause, and it's good that they should believe in the peaceful protests. However, quite a few people are doing it because they want to protest. I bet quite a few of the people who are going to this protest are the same ones that went to all the anti-Brexit protests, that went to the climate emergency protests, which were a big thing last year. Where did that go? We don't see that anymore. And that's the annoying thing, because these people get involved in protests and a couple of months later they'll
Blame the
disappear.
government.
Last year, do you remember when Boris Johnson took over as Prime Minister? And I rewatched this yesterday for some reason, I don't know why. And there was massive climate emergency protest outside number 10, and they stood in front of his car as he was driving to the palace and everything. And it was like this massive thing. And then all of a sudden, within a couple of months, that had disappeared.
Yeah.
and I'm concerned this is the same thing. There's all these protests now, but half of them, when it's died down, after it's lost its initial spark, they'll just go home.
Yeah,
And
they'll
what will
go
be
home
left
and move on to the next thing to complain about.
what we'll be left with is a lot of defaced statues and war memorials. There was a war memorial. There was a memorial. I'm not going to call it a war memorial because it's not a statue in Bristol, I think it was, that was teared down today
Yeah.
and thrown into the river by protesters. And it was a statue of who was a historic slave owner. He was involved in the English trade. He was like a big, really involved in it.
Yeah.
80,000 men were transferred to America and all over the world as part of slavery. And what I didn't know, because when they said they tore it down, they just said slave owner's statue tore down. But when you actually read about it, when he died, he donated all of his money to charity to the city of Bristol to help them develop and
Yeah.
basically build up their area. And that's why a statue was made of him, because he had donated all of his wealth after he died charity. Now, you could argue that's slave money because he was involved in the slave trade, like the majority of people were when he was alive. And these protesters decided to tear it down and throw it in the river without asking the majority of people who lived in Bristol
Yeah.
whether they wanted it down or not. And when a police officer, this is what really wound me up, when a police officer was asked why he didn't tell other police officers to stop them from tearing this down, he said, well, I kind of agree with them, and I think that they should have teared it down. Now, in my personal opinion, that is not right. It's not for the police officer to say what his personal feelings are. He should be enforcing law enforcement. They had no right to tear that statue down. That statue has been there for centuries. It's a historical site, technically
Yeah.
speaking, and protesters decided to tear it down, and the police didn't stop.
Because because the reason why the police won't, especially in this country, is because they know how they will be portrayed and vilified in the media. And
Well,
that if they're seen, you know, the police enforcing the law on people who are, out there causing destruction and protesting in the name of Black Lives Matter, how the social media nut jobs and media will portray that police officer so on, because he's stopping them people tear down that statue, he must be a racist because they're there for Black Lives Matter and that stuff. And no,
I think that's the problem. But I think the police are scared. The police are scared in this country of offending the protesters.
Yeah.
And there was a photo of loads of, well, actually, I think it was a video of loads of policemen kneeling to kind of show respect to the protest.
Yeah.
And there was this one black police officer who refused to kneel. And all these protesters were shouting at him and throwing stuff at him and telling him to kneel down. And he was black.
Yeah.
So some of these protesters' minds don't think that if they're black, it doesn't matter, because they were shouting at this police officer, trying to make him kneel, and he was refusing. Because I think Mike Tyson, I'm sure, was one of the celebrities who really quickly came out and basically said, I'm all for equality, but I do not support these protests.
Yeah.
And that's true. Not every black person is supporting these protests. I mean, some of the usual ones have come out. Obviously, Spike Lee's come out and said he supports them because he didn't win that Oscar that one time. So a lot of ethnic are coming out, but there are a few who are saying, hang on, this is going against all of the equality we've been fighting for our entire life. This is, there's footage of white people, of kids, come on, just because they didn't kneel, getting stabbed, thrown on the floor and kicked. That makes those people no better than the police officers that killed George Floyd in America.
Yeah.
How does that show that you're better than them? If just because a white kid won't kneel for you, you've beaten him up and started stabbing him. They should know better. If the protesters, peaceful protest is fine, but when you start making it violent, you're no better than the people you're protesting
Yeah.
against, in my personal opinion,
Yeah.
anyway.
Oh yeah. It just like I know we said at the start of the whole Corona crisis that it's shown how people's true nature, people's true colours, how selfish they are, and
Yeah.
how people are acting like pretty much acting like animals, if I had to describe it myself. Like in this
Oh,
situation, and just shows just what the fuck out. Where did we go wrong?
2020 is really
It's highlighted
2020
the flaws in
2020 is going to
human
be
nature.
remembered. 2020 is going to be remembered as a very difficult year, not for just this country, but the world. We've had the coronavirus pandemic, and now we have the Black Lives Matter movement and all of these protests. It's really going to go down in history as one of those years which tested the will of just people in general.
Yeah.
Because you can see that the world is struggling at the moment. There's been a lot, and I'm sure we're about to get on to a little update about the coronavirus situation and what our government's doing. But it really is stretching, I think, everyone's will to the limits.
Yeah.
I think we're going to get through it, but I think it's going to get a lot harder before it gets better,
Oh yeah.
especially
Definitely.
in terms of economy.
Yeah, that's where I think we should end that topic there for the day, because it's a mess.
Yeah.
It just makes me want
So
to shake my head in shame of everything. But there we are.
so anyway,
Let's move on
something
to what's happened. Let's focus mainly on our country and
yeah.
our current situation, which our government could possibly help control and not be blamed. Well, actually, no, they'd be blamed regardless. But is the
Yeah.
whole coronavirus situation. You know that one.
Yeah, that little thing.
Yeah. So let's see where are we at in the whole corona in this country at the moment. Well, as we saw at the start of June, the bit of lockdown measures were eased, as in now you can meet up to 6 people outside, socially distanced, of course, because everyone's obeying that at the moment, which we'll get onto a bit more. Which I have seen a lot of people just not give a damn about social distancing at all and have complete disregard for it at all, which I have to say I've actually been good. In terms of people I've actually seen outside of lockdown, if I'm going to be honest, it's probably you and my mum.
Yeah.
To be fair,
I've
outside of my
probably
current
only
household, should I just add?
I've, I've probably only seen you and a couple of members of my family,
Yeah.
but all following social distance precautions, not doing anything stupid like having a massive family barbecue with with the entire family. Nothing like that. But
Yeah.
obviously, the government's had a bit of a bad time of it recently, haven't they?
Yes. Well, it doesn't help. It doesn't help with okay, of course, the whole Dominic Cummings situation, which is sort of faded away now. It doesn't help though that the government has a man which the media and the social left liberal establishment have been wanting to tear down for ages, ever since the 2016 Brexit election. They've had this man's head on a dartboard, and the Guardian, the Daily Mirror have been throwing darts at his head probably 24/7 since Brexit happened.
Well, let's be fair here. I think both Boris Johnson and Dominic Cummings are very hated by the left wing media and the establishment in general.
Because can be argued Dominic Cummings is the mastermind behind Brexit and Boris getting into number 10.
Oh, he was the mastermind of the Vote Leave campaign, no doubt, and of course,
also Boris's the Conservative 2019 general election as well.
Yeah, which of course the Conservatives won by a landslide with an 80-seat majority, which no one could take away from them. But of course, if you've and it always makes me laugh because of course when Boris took over as Conservative leader, he kind of purged the Conservative Party and kicked out all of the really hardcore Remainers like Ken Clarke, Philip Hammond, and all of them. And then he brought some of them back in. But you notice that some of the Conservative people, some of Conservative MPs, have been waiting just for an opportunity like this to start saying that Boris should be out of number 10. And I've noticed on the radio, they've had Conservative MPs on there who said, oh, actually, Boris Johnson, he's not been a great prime minister. I think we need to rethink him as our leader. So already, there's Conservative MPs starting to say we might need to start rethinking. I mean, it would never.
That's only been a small minority. That's very very small, and that was of the bad batch that Boris kicked out and let back in, and the small batch that Boris let back in when he did that. It was one that
I know.
I can't remember who it was now. It was one of the staunch Remainer ones that Boris did let in the end.
Quite a few, isn't there? But
yeah,
no, I was about to say that all of this talk of votes and no confidence in Boris Johnson, it would never happen. Not only is I think that's
numbers to start with.
Not only would I think that MPs, 365 Conservative MPs, I think he'd win amongst the MPs, and even if he didn't, the Conservative membership, people like us who would vote in that contest, I don't think would be turning our support away from Boris Johnson.
No.
So I think he is there for a long time. I think they're just not used to having such a strong Conservative leader who's in such a strong position in terms of the leadership of the party. They're used to May and people like that. So I did hear this one rumour, which it made me laugh out loud when I saw it. And it was in the Daily Express, and it was an unnamed Conservative MP has said that it is very likely that Chancellor Rishi Sunak will be Prime Minister very soon.
No.
Because apparently there's been a lot of friction between Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak. And sooner or later, Rishi Sunak's going to oust Boris Johnson as leader and become Prime Minister. And now, in my personal opinion, this is complete rubbish. That wouldn't happen. Rishi Sunak's a very strong supporter of Boris Johnson's, supported him throughout his tenure as Prime Minister. So let's just be clear, that's not happening. Boris isn't going anywhere. He hasn't even been Prime Minister for a year yet. That man isn't going in. I don't think that man's going anywhere.
No, he's not.
I think he'll be staying on till 2024 at least for the next election. I don't see him going anytime soon. Unless something really crazy happens, I don't see him leaving. I think some of these people just want Boris out. They just want him out. I think some Conservatives will never like him and will never accept him. But who cares if they accept him? Because clearly from the election results, the country...
If the majority... all that matters is if the majority of the country does.
Yes, and that's the main...
Which the left still haven't grasped the idea that to win an election you have to appeal to the majority of the country, not just the Twitter brigade and the young people.
And Keir Starmer's been on full... Keir Starmer's been on full...
Keir Starmer, the forensic... No.
The funny thing about Keir Starmer is the media love him at the moment. The Mirror, the Guardian, they all love him at the moment. They're all posting pictures of him and saying, "Oh, look, Keir Starmer." But if you actually look at the membership of the Labour Party, which of course under Jeremy Corbyn became very left-wing, Starmer's actually losing quite a lot of support within the membership of the Labour Party because they don't think he's left-wing enough.
I know.
Which is, of course, that's bad for me and Matthew because, of course, the more centrist he becomes, the bigger challenge he poses for Boris, technically.
Yeah.
But it's quite funny that this man who the media love at the moment doesn't actually seem to be loved within his own party. They just don't seem to. No. And I can. Starmer don't. I don't know if Starmer believes in anything. No offense, when you see him and he's talking about stuff, he doesn't have any passion in his voice. Say what you want about Corbyn, but at least he believed in what he stood for. Starmer doesn't. Starmer looks like he's someone who would change his mind almost instantly just to get. Starmer reminds me. He's like the Joe Biden of the UK.
Oh,
the guy who would say anything to get elected.
Yeah.
That's what Starmer's coming across as at the moment. And at the moment, Starmer's just nothing. He's just nothing. He doesn't seem to be very good or very bad. He's just there.
Yeah.
As if to say hi. Oh,
I don't
he's
think
nothing
Starmer
more.
really has much of a personality, if I'm honest with you. It's literally going, yeah, this. I'm like,
Yeah.
you've not got a personality of a leader, full stop. Like, from how he
reading,
comes
reading,
across.
the, quest- reading
And
the
of course,
questions his
we
private
can
secretary.
argue Boris Johnson's performance in PMQs is not as strong or as bombastic as it usually would be. That could be because of the virtual parliament and social distancing and all that. Because, Boris Johnson comes to life, in front of an audience.
Yeah,
If that makes
I
sense.
think I think that's the main problem. I think if all MPs were there, like 365 Conservatives, I do think when Boris says something or and he has been fighting back against Keir
Not
Starmer.
quite, as he has been though.
No.
That the big bombastic attitude that Boris Johnson would come in and sweep the floor.
But because there isn't MPs there to kind of shout and say all that, it just doesn't have the same impact. Like hopefully we get that Boris back soon. I think when
Yeah.
Parliament start coming back properly, we'll get that. But of course, a lot of members of Parliament feel they shouldn't have to turn up for work at the
No,
moment.
yeah, it's funny that the MPs are quite a lot like a lot of furloughed staff. They've been able to get paid 8% of their wages by sitting at home doing nothing, and because they've lost a bit of that 20% of their wages, that they weren't spending anyway, and got back on transport costs and not having to go to work in the first place and a bunch of other things. But yeah, they were able to sit at home doing nothing. I know a lot of MPs are the same now.
And of course, Labour MP Angela Eagle has said
God.
Jacob Rees-Mogg should resign as Leader of the House of Commons because he's handled the return to Parliament so badly. And Mogg basically told her to shut up and get on with her job. It's great, isn't it? Because whenever something seems to not be going right straight away for Labour, they automatically tell government ministers to resign. It's like if Labour had it their way, like there'd be ministers resigning every day, and then
There wouldn't be any ministers left if Labour had it their way, and we would have had another general election already.
All 365 Conservatives would have joined the cabinet, resigned from the cabinet, and there'd be no one left to kind of lead the country.
And they're what I'd say are very silly people. If I had to sum it up in a nice way, silly people.
Well, Labour are just dead at the moment, aren't they? They're not anything.
Could be worse.
But I was going to say, I think that will lead on to our next topic.
Wait, there's a topic out of this?
Well, there is a topic for me because I know a bit about it because I've been following it, and that's the Liberal Democrats.
Who cares?
The Liberal Democrats, there'll be a Liberal Democrat out there somewhere who might watch, because of course the Liberal Democrats, who this time last year were a big thing, and they were winning European elections by big numbers and winning local elections, and there was like 21 Lib Dem MPs, and of course Vince Cable stood down and Jo Swinson came in, who declared herself a future prime minister. Who was going to win a majority Lib Dem government, and what happened? They returned 11 MPs, one fewer than they won in 2017, and Jo Swinson herself lost her own seat. So it's very clear that the Lib Dems have been a bit shell-shocked by this, and they did release an analysis of their campaign strategy and basically said that it was rubbish. And
we got it wrong, sorry.
But that because I love leadership races. It doesn't matter what party. I like following leadership elections. So the Lib Dem one is no different. And it's very clear that, like the majority of Lib Dem elections, there's a candidate of the right wing of the party, a candidate of the left wing of the party, and a candidate who's just trying to stand in between both to try and win. Now, there are 3 candidates going for the Lib Dem leadership in 2020. The first that I'm going to do, well, there's 3, but I'd say the most experienced one is Sir Ed Davey, who's probably one of the more experienced Liberal Democrat MPs. He's former climate change secretary in the coalition government and was heavily involved in the coalition government and supported Nick Clegg. Now he's considered the candidate of the right wing of the party because he supported the coalition. So any Lib Dem that supported the coalition is considered pretty much a conservative. So I don't see the Liberal Democrat membership voting for Davey for the reason.
A bunch of clowns, for once.
Yeah, for the simple reason Davey stood for the leadership before against Joe Swinson and did very poorly, and the fact that he's too close to the coalition government and wouldn't be trusted. Yeah, the other two are pretty pointless MPs who haven't been in Parliament for 5 minutes. One of them is Layla Morton, who is basically the PC candidate and the woke candidate. She's running as this pansexual MP who's going to bring new life into the Liberal Democrats. So she's basically running on a social justice platform. She doesn't really have much to say about herself. Experienced, and like most Liberal Democrats, supported the Remain campaign, so not really very relevant anymore. And the other one is someone's name who I can't even pronounce. She's also pretty pointless. They're all pointless. And recent polls show if the Lib Dems ran in a general election, they would only return 2 MPs. So if ever there was a political party which looks like there was a political party which looks like they're on the way out, I'd say it's the Liberal Democrats, especially as the candidates they got running for the leadership are all pretty useless. None of them seem to stand out on a national debate anymore.
Yeah, but they're going to stop Brexit though, aren't they?
Well, that's the thing. I kept saying in podcasts before the general election, I said the problem with the Liberal Democrats is they're running as just up. Once the Remain argument ends, what the hell are they going to stand for anymore? And what I said has come to fruition because, of course, they don't have anything now that the Remain argument's out the window. What do they stand for?
They don't stand for anything.
They were destroyed by the coalition government. They trugged along with this Brexit Remain argument for a couple of years, and now they've realised, well, actually, damn. We're over. We're never gonna be a credible party of power again. It's very clear. We're too bad. We're too useless.
Yeah, I to be honest, I've not got much to add on that, apart from who. I don't have a bloody clue because they're not important. It's not like their party big enough. A party big enough, once were, back in 2010, where they were a good chunk, that could possibly, sway the course of politics in the House of Commons. They're a big chunk needed to get one party across the line, or they're a big chunk of MPs that can get a piece of legislation through. They're not. No, we're not at that stage anymore, and the Lib Dems are. Well,
to be honest, I would say the Lib Dems weren't even something when they were in coalition government, because I remember when I was growing up, when I started taking interest in politics, David Cameron and Nick Clegg were
chunk, though.
Politics. I didn't even know Nick Clegg was a member of a different party.
Yeah.
I thought he was a conservative because the Lib Dems practically acted like conservatives during that coalition.
Yeah.
And now you can really see they're struggling because Lib Dems are supposed to be the centrist political party, centre-left of our party, and in between Conservatives and Labour, a real alternative party. But in recent years, they really have just become this kind of marginalised Remain party, which is becoming just as out of date as the Brexit party, just kind of becoming this old political party that no one really cares about anymore. And yeah, if they couldn't gain seats during a Brexit general election, are they really going to gain seats in a normal general election?
Nope.
I I don't think. I think they might stay around, but they're never gonna get back to their peak, which was what in they once had 62 MPs, they now have 11, so they're not coming back. Let's just be
It's
clear.
laughable.
They're never gonna. I don't think they're
No.
ever gonna come back. They won't even be the third party because you've got the SNP there. So no, they're
No,
just
they're
they're
done.
gone.
They're done.
They're done. Well,
So I think we've concluded the topics we're going to go over in today's edition of the TPM podcast.
yes, I think that's all the topics checked.
Yeah, we got through it.
Hopefully we didn't offend anyone. And if we have offended someone, then well, that's what politics is about: expressing different opinions and debating them. And that's what me and Matthew do. we
No,
give our own
you're
our own
wrong.
opinion.
Do some research. You're wrong. That's all you need to say.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Do some research. Don't worry. I did do research. That's why I brought up quite a lot of examples that I've seen in the news and online because I did some research.
Yes.
So yes, don't worry about that.
Oh, and current lockdown updates. In a month's time, this mop should be cleared up. On top of my head.
Well, you could get a
No.
home hair.
No.
I've had 2 home
No, because
haircuts and
because I was told if at the moment if I get a home haircut where I try to sort the size of hair out but then my hair's gonna but I'm not gonna trust anyone to actually sort the rest of my hair. I'm gonna look like Adolf Hitler.
Wait, excuse me, I had my hair cut right back and it didn't do me any harm.
Yeah, but your style was just.
It's a
Easy.
functional haircut. It doesn't need to look nice or
Actually,
be coloured.
do you know how it's going at the moment? Because usually, when it's cut short, you could see here, clear,
Yeah.
short there, clear line there, and you brush it over. Now, if I go like that, do you know what? You haven't seen this in a while, haven't you?
Oh my god!
2014, Matthew.
If anyone is wondering why I'm laughing, that's high school Matthew. That's like early. That's Matthew near enough when I first met him, looking like that. Near enough.
It's like 2013, 14, Matthew.
Old-fashioned Matthew. That's what that is. And if you're wondering what old-fashioned Tommy looks like, well, Tommy hasn't changed. Tommy's always looked.
Yeah, just a bit smaller.
Yeah, just a bit smaller. Oi, it's not nice.
Oh, I meant in height
smaller.
And waist, but.
Oh, right, good. I thought you meant the other thing. I've lost weight, thank you very much. I've lost weight.
So, can I say I have as well?
You have lost weight, yes. I don't think anyone's denying that. Depends. Everyone's lost weight. Well, on TPN they have, which isn't hard because there's only 2 of us. I make it sound like we've got a massive production team and staff, which of course we haven't. We haven't got anything like that. No.
Right, I think we best get on out of here before we go off on another rant somewhere.
Big shout
episode.
Big shout out to George Hunt who gave the inspiration for some of the topics in this TPN podcast.
George
after we had no, God no. Well, maybe, who knows? After we had a discussion about the Black Lives Matter protests and all that. So thank you for inspiration.
They did. I was playing Call of Duty.
Yeah, you weren't involved. You were. No, you were.
I wasn't going to get into it because they're having an argument on the whole Black Lives Matter protests. I looked on my iPad, 80 plus notifications.
Trust me, I don't know where they came from either. You're just as surprised as me.
I can't be bothered to read through all that. Let's just jump to the top to the bottom. Yeah.
Hey, trust me, I weren't in a talkative mood that night. I just turned on the TV. I had a bowl of M&Ms. I was just about to put on Mr. Bean, and then all these messages came through. I had to deal with that. took up valuable time in my evening. That's what that did.
Yeah. Right, I think we're going to get out of it then. Thank you everyone for tuning back in.
Thank you.
I would play the outro, but I've lost it somewhere because I'm still doing sorted all my drives out because I've recently upgraded computer systems, which is a topic for MLC Tech, not TPN, because it's, you know,
And
20
anyone
RTX
asks,
2080 Ti, not, you know. Yeah, anyway, you will return
If
soon.
no, can I just say, if anyone was wondering where the intro is, Tommy was also wondering where the intro is as well, because no one told Tommy before the live stream started that there weren't going to be an intro. So that's why at the start of this podcast, Tommy kind of sat there not doing a lot
It's either
because
on one. It's on one of my SSDs. I need to rename them because they're all called local discs C at the moment.
yeah, I know, but you could have told Tommy beforehand because he was just waiting for the intro to play, which never played. He didn't know what was going on.
Right.
Bad
Anyway,
man.
this is where we're going to end today's show. Thank you everyone for watching. I say thank you everyone for watching. We've had one viewer so far, but when it gets published, should I say?
One's better than none.
Yeah, I suppose. Right. With that said, we're going to end the stream. Thank you everyone for watching, and goodbye. Remember,
Goodbye.
2 meters.